The ice rink has been slow going, and a little frustrating so far this year. It's the middle of December, and we really haven't skated that much. Granted, the kids went skating for the first time the other night, but there were entire sections of the rink where they couldn't go, and the rest of it was so bumpy and rough that they kept falling. And that's not as much fun as it sounds. Some years, we don't get to skate in December at all. A couple years ago, we never got a cold snap until late January. The rink was basically a pond until after the New Year, which was a problem because we host an annual New Year's Eve party for all our friends and their families. There's skating, sledding, bonfires, food, and drink. That year, no skating. But that was nature's fault. This year, the delay rests entirely on my shoulders. The problem is, I tried to eke out another year of use on this silage tarp. As I began filling the rink, I noticed holes I hadn't seen before, starting with the water.
Well, this rain is definitely good for filling the ice rink. What's not so good is the tear in the plastic that I found last night. I put this in as a way to temporarily lift up the plastic because I do have the tear right here. So I'm going to patch that and just keep an eye on it. It's not the best time to patch it. I'm going to use this greenhouse repair tape. This stuff's incredibly expensive. I don't know, it's probably 8 inches across, and I think I have a 48-foot roll I've had for years because I'm very sparing with it. I don't remember how much it costs, but I do remember being shocked when I purchased it years ago, so I'm sure it's much more expensive now. I don't need very much to cover this patch, or to cover this hole rather, but I do need to dry it.
It's annoying to have the hose running for a couple hours and come out to inspect the rink and find a big puddle outside the frame. Those, however, are fixable. Much worse are the holes I can't see, especially those that aren't along the edges, holes out in the middle. If the hole in the floor of the rink isn't large, it's still possible to get ice. Of course, it's not possible to get ice at all if you hook up the hose, spread it out, get to the ice, and realize that the screw in the spigot that's been becoming looser and looser has finally fallen out, and you have to retrace your steps and try to find it. And if you can't do that, you have to go and find a new spigot. Anyway, back to the water and the problems with the ice rink. The problem lies in one of the qualities of water that make it one of the most important reasons Earth is able to sustain life. Water freezes from the top down. I never really thought much about water until I took an oceanography course in college, and the professor spent an entire 90-minute lecture describing why water is such an amazing molecular substance and how, in combination with the Earth's unique Goldilocks position in the solar system, water's unique properties are what make life on Earth, and its evolution from single-celled organisms to what we see now, possible. The way water freezes, from the top to bottom, is one of those factors. Think about it. If water froze in any other way, from bottom to top, all at once, whatever, there'd be no fish. But I digress. The point of all this is that there are obviously small holes in certain spots on the floor of the rink. So what happened in those spots, over the holes, over the few weeks of moderately cold weather during which I tried to fill the rink, was that I kept getting a skim layer of ice, and then all of the as yet unfrozen water underneath that drained out through the holes overnight. I have had one very large patch where there was just a thin layer of ice that acted like rice glass, very easy to break, and under that, nothing. I don't have any video of how it was, but if you've ever walked in the woods in the late fall or early winter before it snows, you've seen this phenomenon if you've been out on the morning after a really cold night. Any place where there was a lot of water just under the surface is now filled with heaved-up crystals of ice and soil that crunch underfoot. Alternatively, perhaps you've seen very shallow puddles in a parking lot the morning after a really cold night. When the water in that puddle freezes, there isn't enough ice to fill the depression, and you just get air underneath. Essentially, that's what I had in the ice rink. A thin layer that kept breaking. I'd refill it, the top layer would freeze overnight, and the rest would drain out. When that happens, it's time to stop setting up the hose and leaving it, and start spending time out on the rink, flooding it by hand. On the one hand, that's very frustrating. On the other, I found the time I spend working on the rink to be therapeutic. Usually, it's at night, after the kids are asleep. I go out, hook up the hose, and work under the stars and Christmas lights in the quiet, frigid air when the only sounds are the water hitting the ice and the distant thunder of the lake ice shifting. I've spent the past few days coming out twice, once in the morning and once late at night, because we've had a major cold snap. The high during the day for the past week has been in the low to mid-teens, and the nighttime lows have been 2 or 3 degrees Fahrenheit. By flooding the hole when it's very cold and only putting a little water into it, I've been able to add a small layer each time I come out, and build upon that the next time. Finally, I've got all the thin ice and holes where the water drained from beneath it filled in, and the rink is solid enough everywhere to skate. That does not mean the work is done. In fact, working on the rink is a constant throughout the winter. And a backyard rink or pond is nothing like the rink in an arena, where everything is controlled. For example, really cold days, like today, actually make it harder to smooth the ice with just a hose nozzle. The reason being that the thin layer of water I added at one end is frozen by the time I get back from the other. That means there's a new ridge where the now higher layer is frozen. Still, that's not nearly as big a problem or project as the big depressions left by water that drains from beneath the skim layer. So now, it's time to start working on the ice like a finish carpenter at the end of a house build. All the big stuff is done, and it's time for the details. That includes trying to make the ice as smooth as possible and ensuring there are no ridges or dips at the edges where the plastic meets the ice. It also includes shaving off any chips or bumps that flash froze when it was really cold and I was trying to cover holes by packing in snow and flooding it. My next step is to fix my ice rake, which I broke near the end of last season. But that's a project for another day and another video.